Hello, and welcome to the live stream. We are streaming across multiple platforms. Let's see how this is going to go. I need my coffee. Don't know about you, but we're going to be doing some prompt-led development, AI coding. People call it a lot of different things. Don't call it vibe. Call it vibe coding. I will slap you. See. Give me a second as I get things going here. Enjoy some music. Give me a second. Okay, looks like we got a couple of live streams going. Okay, welcome to the live stream. My name is Joe. I go by Solutions Joe. Don't be afraid to make a comment. Say hello. To make a comment. Say hello. We're just getting started. Too many screens. Okay. Welcome to the live stream. My name's Joe. We're gonna get started here shortly. Let's see what we got going on. We got any watchers? We got any viewers? Let's get going. Happy Saturday to everybody out there. Welcome. What are we going to do? We're going to do some live streaming. We're going to do some prompt-led development. We are going to be working on developing an application, a system that is built by AI for the purposes of predicting the move of Bitcoin. So let's get going here. Let me start bringing up my screens. Hello. Welcome to the live stream. So we are streaming on, what are we streaming on? We are streaming on X. We are streaming on TikTok. We are streaming on YouTube. We're streaming on verticals and horizontals on YouTube. You got questions, you got comments, drop them in, and I'll be happy to try to answer them for you. What we are going to do in this session, which is probably going to be a very long session, I'm going to continue doing some development on an application. The application is affectionately known as Signal Harbor. And the goal of this application, which is completely and built by AI, is to predict the Bitcoin moves, and specifically the short-term Bitcoin moves. So let me start sharing out some of my screens. And if you're interested in how you can develop with AI, this is going to be the stream for you. Stick around, ask your questions, and I will be happy to try to answer them as we move through this. So let me walk you through what I'm going to do here. You're going to start seeing some screens. You're going to start seeing my headshot. You're going to start seeing me share some stuff out. I do have multiple streams going on, so please bear with me as I update my screens. If you are watching on YouTube Verticals, YouTube Shorts, you might want to jump over to the main channel and watch over there. That'll give you a much better view of the screens we're going to be sharing. Okay? And again, questions, comments, let me know, and I will do my best to try to answer them for you. Welcome in on TikTok as well. Looks like we've got a lot of people joining in. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so let's get started with prompt-led development. What is it? So it's building with AI. And again, if you call it vibe coding, I'm going to slap you. Okay, I've been in the technology business for nearly 30 years, and vibe coding, for those who know what they're doing, is honestly kind of a nasty term, because you're not going to get much out of vibe coding. I will tell you that first. Based on my 30 years of tech experience, as well as the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years of working with AI every day, from 10 to 12 hours every day. So let me start sharing out some screens. First one I'm going to bring up here is our Kalshi market. Let's bring this up. I'm sure lots of people are going to be like, what is this? What's going on here? Ask your questions, and I will tell you what's going on here. Okay, so for those who may not be familiar with the probability market, there is something called poly market, which is largely inaccessible to those who are in the United States because of various laws and regulations. But there is another probabilities market called Kalshi, which those in the United States like myself can access. And welcome Scope, welcome in. And you got questions, comments, drop them in. So what are we looking at? We're looking at the Kalshi Bitcoin market. This is basically a predictability market. And how this thing works, if you're not familiar with it, and then I'm going to get into my actual software that I'm building. I call it Signal Harbor, and it is a complex mathematical formulas used to try to predict the move of Bitcoin as related to the probability of it closing above or below a certain strike price here. So if you can see the screen that I have up, this is again Kalshi's the Kalshi probability market. And what we've got going on here is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is currently trading above the strike price. And how this basically works is that you're buying contracts. Okay, you're buying contracts, and you are saying that you're buying a contract for a yes, which means that the price is going to close above that line you see here, the big black line. Okay, or the price is going to close below that, and you then would buy down or buy a no contract. And you can buy contracts for as little as $1, and also go up to many thousands of dollars. It's a very interesting market. It's similar to options within the world of stocks and investments. Okay, I see that we've got looks like probably a bot, the cat father maybe, crypto board jumping in here. So I will tell you that I'm new to streaming, and I don't have any moderators, so I will try to moderate myself if I can here. And maybe say goodbye to the cat father. Okay. So if you have questions or comments, oops, cat father was not a bot, but he kept dropping some very interesting crypto board numbers in. Anyways, the goal here is to give you an insight to what does it actually look like to code with AI. Okay. So quick background, who am I? My name is Joe, Solutions Architect. Been doing this for nearly 30 years in the tech industry. I have programmed in just about every language underneath the sun, worked with multiple types of technologies across a very broad set. Have worked on mainframes, distributed systems, Linux, Unix, AAX, Windows, you name it. Okay, so I have a very broad technical background. And what people are not understanding, and what you perhaps don't understand if you have any kind of technical background right now, is you have been given an opportunity unlike any other opportunity you have ever been given before in your life when it comes to being able to take advantage of your technical skill set in such a way that you've never been able to do before. And what do I mean by that? I have been given a gift, okay? The gift is AI. It allows me to build complex applications, complex solutions that I otherwise would not have been either able to build or that would have taken me months and months and months of my time. So what did I decide to do? Well, I needed myself a project. I work full time in the tech world, but I needed a side project, and so I discovered poly markets. If you're familiar with it at all, I discovered Kalshi. Okay, these are probability markets, and I discovered them and been hearing about them for quite some time, but honestly didn't pay much attention to them. Now recently, I started paying closer attention, and I found it quite intriguing. Some of these markets, some of these probability markets are what I would call subjective. Okay, so if you understand the difference between subjective versus objective, subjective is basically an opinion. Okay, so, and if you're doing probabilities and you're betting on something or you're taking a contract out on something from a probability perspective that is related to something that is more subjective, like did a certain politician say a certain word in their speech or not, okay, which is for me subjective, versus tracking an actual price movement like Bitcoin. Give me 1 second. So I'm back. Sorry about that. So tracking an actual price movement, something that is public information, okay, that is objective. And the example that we have on the screen here, this is the move of Bitcoin over a 15-minute window, okay? It's objective. It either is going to close above or below the target. It's plain and simple. There's no argument about it, okay? No subjectivity to it. And so basically what it boils down to is data, okay? If you've got the data to understand what's going on in terms of the market, and you can potentially use AI to build a system to help you understand what's going on in the market, well, you potentially can get yourself an edge. So that is what I had decided to do. So let's bring up this market again. Sorry about that. I've got a little frog in my throat. If you've got questions, comments, drop them in. I will do my best to answer them for you. But I do want to keep things moving along. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start pulling up my coding environment, okay? That is called an IDE, Interactive Development Environment. I use VS Code. So I'm going to pull up VS Code and start logging into it. And as I do, you're going to start seeing a lot of code. And again, feel free to ask questions, comments. I will do my best to try to answer them for you. Let me see if I can get my TikTok comments. I need my comment board. Come on. Let's see if I can get my comment board over here. Again, give me 1 second. I don't know why this is so large. Welcome, Faust. Okay. So apparently the cat father was sending an encrypted message. Not exactly sure why. Okay, so let's bring up our coding environment. So as a solutions architect and working in the consulting business for many, many years, okay, I'm going to try to simplify things for those who may not be familiar with what's going on my screen, okay? And if you have questions, comments, drop them in. I will do my best to try to answer them for you. That is what I do. But right now we are focused on what does it mean to build a application using AI, and what kind of applications can you build? So the application that I am currently building is a Bitcoin prediction system. Why? Well, it's kind of fun. But it also is a very complex type of application to build. So I'm logging into what is called WSL. What is WSL for those who may not be aware? WSL stands for the Windows Sub Linux System. Okay, and what is it? It is sorry, I'm typing and working at the same time. So it is basically how you can run Linux on a Windows box. Why would I want to run Linux on a Windows box? Well, let's get this back over here. Okay, so why would I want to run Linux on a Windows box? Because it is one of the best ways to run VS Code, Codex, which is OpenAI's coding agent, as well as Claude Code, for those who are familiar with any of those. And if you're not, drop a question, make a comment. I'll do my best to try to answer it for you. So we're going to go into Signal here. Don't confuse Signal Harbor with Signal the application. Now we're going to spin up our VS Code project. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, so we've got our VS Code project that we have spun up here. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, Shorts, you can head over to the longs and you're going to get much better view of the screen. If you are watching on TikTok, you'll notice that I'm streaming horizontally. If you spin that phone around, or I think if you just tap the button to say full screen on TikTok, you'll get to see the full screen version of this, which is going to be a whole lot easier on your eyes. So let's continue moving along here. You got questions, comments, drop them in. I will try to give you an answer to anything you may ask in terms of a general. So prompt-led development, why PLD and not vibe coding? Vibe coding does not take into consideration, okay? And most of these platforms that are trying to sell you subscriptions to vibe coding, they're not taking into consideration the complexity of both the front end, back end, multiple services running at the same time, okay? And I understand if you are somebody who has no technical background and you've bought into the hype that says anybody now can create an application with just a few words. Well, you are quickly going to see, okay, of what it actually really takes to work with AI and continue to build out an application. So the application that I have started building is, again, something that I call Signal Harbor, and actually that name was the name that AI came up with. So Signal Harbor, what is it? What's the point of it? The goal of this application is to help me predict the Bitcoin price movement, okay, during a 15-minute window of time, okay? Again, what you're seeing up on screen here now is a probability market, okay? So my goal here is to predict the movement of Bitcoin during this 15-minute period of time. Now, the better you can do that, the more money you can make. Now, I'm going to tell you up front, I am not offering anybody financial advice. I am simply showing you, for informational sake and for educational sake, what I am doing. What you do and your choices are entirely up to you. So this is not financial advice, and you're going to hear me say that over and over again. Please do not ask me whether you should invest in Bitcoin or anything else out there. That is not what this is about. What this is about is that, as I mentioned, and I'll keep mentioning, those with technical skills, those who have some technical ability, some technical chops, okay, like myself, who's been working in the industry for 30 years, okay, or for people who may be like you, who want to get more involved in the technical world. I'm talking about software development, application development, things of this nature, and who put some effort into learning the basics, okay? Understanding the difference between front end and back end, understanding how you implement some authentication, understanding how you implement some persistence in terms of whether it's session, data, or other mechanisms, okay? These are important concepts. If none of this makes any sense to you, still stick around, watch, enjoy, ask your questions. I will try to give you some responses if I can, okay? But my goal here is to do some prompt-led development and continue my project. Now, I'm going to give you a very valuable tip. This is something that I have not heard anybody else talk about, okay? And it is, I think, one of the best bargains there currently is out there when it comes to people who are wanting to do some development, some software development using AI, okay, but are finding it too expensive, right? They look at Claude Code as an example, which I have a subscription to, but they look at that and they say, wait, I can't afford $100 a month or $150 a month for a max plan, and if I buy a lesser plan, then I'm running out of tokens too quickly, and I'm not getting things done. Well, I've got a potential solution for you that works for me, okay? And again, I'm going to be perfectly upfront. I have multiple AI subscriptions, okay? But the absolute best value when it comes to AI coding is to take advantage of OpenAI. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's start with first taking a quick look at OpenAI, okay? So if we look at ChatGPT, a pro plan, okay, if we look at the plans here that they have available, they have a plus plan, I'm sorry, not a pro plan, but a plus plan. They have a business plan and a pro plan. I have a plus plan. I've had a plus plan for now probably close to a year and a half, 2 years, okay? The amount of tokens that the plus plan and that OpenAI provides to you for the purposes of utilizing their coding agents, specifically Codex, is really very, very generous for that price. Extremely generous, actually. I love it. And if you are somebody who's saying, Joe, how can I get involved, or how can I start doing development programming using AI? I'm a student perhaps, or I don't have a job, or maybe I'm a younger person and I don't have a lot of money. What is the most affordable way for me to start doing this, but also at the same time learning and understanding what it is that I'm doing? Well, guess what? It is going to be the plus plan in OpenAI. Now, I will tell you right up front, I don't work for OpenAI. I'm not getting paid by OpenAI. I'm not getting anything for this, and I'm not trying to sell you directly the OpenAI Plus account. But here's the thing, is all the coding that you're going to see that I've done thus far in my application here, okay? And if we're looking at, now we're back to the IDE VS code, okay? You can see on the left-hand side here, I've got a lot of program files that have been created by AI, okay? And a lot of lines of code. If I would have to estimate the number of lines of code that I have right now written by AI over the last few days, it's probably, I don't know, 5,000, maybe 8,000 lines of code, okay? Now, if we take a look at something here, again, if you're not familiar with this, this is VS Code, okay, and IDE. IDE is the interactive development environment, is the best way, okay, to get into AI coding and learning and understanding what you're doing along the way. So ask me, how much does VS Code cost me, Joe? Go ahead and ask me, Joe, how much does VS Code cost me? I bet you're going to be surprised when I tell you the subscription to VS Code, which is, by the way, is a Microsoft product. The cost to you is $0. Yes, that's correct, $0. So if you see me looking around, I'm just trying to keep up with the chats and the questions and the comments, as well as the number of people who are watching at any point in time. And as a reminder, on the YouTube Shorts, if you guys head over to the YouTube Longs or the main channel, you'll be able to see the screens better because they are large and in vertical format. VS Code is free, I guess. Yes, it is. Okay, so Microsoft it's an open source project headed up by Microsoft. It's been for many years. It's one of the favorite developing tools, IDEs, by many developers for a very long time. Now, here's the thing: is VS Code itself is free. You can go out, download it, install it. You don't have to pay for anything. Now, there are plugins for VS Code, and some of those plugins will ask you to pay. Many of the plugins, though, are free. So, baseline, you can get started for free, okay? And am I paying for any plugins at this point in time? Nope. I do not pay for a single plugin at this point in time in terms of VS Code. Now, having said that, the coding agents that I'm using, specifically Codex from OpenAI, as well as Claude Code, these do come as plugins for my VS Code environment just to make it easier for me to do the prompt-led development that I'm doing. And in that sense, of course, I'm paying for the underlying subscriptions. But as I mentioned earlier, my subscription to OpenAI is literally $20 a month plus tax, which I think comes out to $21 a month. And the amount of coding I can do for that is really quite amazing. So if you're someone who's trying to get started in this and you've seen all the gurus and they want to sell you the various other types of IDEs out there, right? Whether it's the, I'm trying to think of some of the popular ones. Windsurfer, I think, is one of them. There's another one out there. I'm trying to remember the name and I can't. But you have to understand that a lot of these are what they call forked versions of VS Code. Okay, so in other words, because it's an open source project, companies have taken the base product of VS Code, they have forked it, which means basically they created their own version on top of the main code for VS Code. And they've created their own version of that. And then by doing so, they're able to turn around and they're able to sell that to you under a subscription model, okay? And charge you, the $30, $35 a month. I was paying that for one of the forked versions. Now I'm trying to remember what the heck that name of that product was. If you got a name for it, throw it out. It's not Windsurfer. It's the other really popular one. But it's a forked version of VS Code. Now, the problem is, and I won't go too much in depth in the fact of the forked versions. The forked versions don't use the Microsoft library for plugins. They use a different library for plugins. There have been some hacks that have occurred because malicious code has made it into these libraries, okay, for the plugins, for the non-official VS Code version, okay, and people have lost. I saw a video of a developer who lost thousands of dollars out of his crypto wallet because of it. So why would you go with one of these others when you can go with VS Code directly, okay, which is a Microsoft product, more trustworthy, better operational aspects, I think, from a security perspective as well. Now, how do you get to the point of coding in VS Code? Well, as I mentioned, you can sign up for OpenAI's $20 a month, and you can get access to their Codex agent, okay? And you can install that within the IDE. So That is exactly what I have been doing. I've been doing it for quite some time, but for this particular new project that I'm working on, I have been using it exclusively. But I'm gonna give you a tip and a trick if you listen closely, okay, on how to take advantage of a little bit of a loophole that OpenAI has, so that you can get more coding done without burning through your tokens. And welcome, I think it's Mohammed. Welcome. Let's see. But the GitHub Copilot and Claude are, and let me see. I think I'm getting my sorry, my chats were getting cut off here a little bit. Yes, you are correct. GitHub charges, right? I actually use the GitHub Copilot in my official job, and they charge substantially for it. So you're absolutely right about that. And Claude is also paid, but also OpenAI is also paid, okay? But when you look at the cost of the various plans out there, for $20 a month through OpenAI, you get a lot of coding that you can get done, okay? And again, here's the tip and trick I'm going to give you, okay? Listen closely, watch closely, because it may go away. So what is it? Well, if I go to, I'm going to go back here to ChatGPT. So here in ChatGPT, which I have, of course, full access to because I have a paid subscription, I also have the concept of something called projects. Now, I don't know what you specifically have available to you and what you don't have available to you in terms of a free plan, because I don't have a free plan. So perhaps you have available projects, perhaps you don't. But here's my point. When I start a complex coding project, AI coding, and again, call it vibe coding, and I'll reach through my screen and slap you, okay? Because it's not vibe coding. This is prompt-led development, and this is where the world is going. And the engineers and software engineers and the developers who understand this and embrace it will succeed, and they will thrive in this environment. Those who don't will fail, and they will find themselves struggling to find a job, okay? So what's the secret sauce here? The secret sauce is when I start my project, especially the complex project that I'm talking about, Bitcoin predictor, okay, that is going to require multiple services, a lot of data analysis and streams, some complex algorithms in order to determine the best model for the prediction, right? Am I going to go directly to VS Code here, okay? And am I going to start just typing away, burning my coding tokens, okay? Because for your inputs and for your outputs, they all get counted basically as tokens, okay? And a token, for the most part, you can equate it to a word, but some words are multiple tokens, okay? We won't go down that rabbit hole, but just understand that every time you're in this environment, okay, you're using Codex. OpenAI's Codex is a plugin with VS Code, and you're going back and forth and having a conversation, you are burning through your tokens. Now, I'm going to open up my little rate limits screen here, and you can see a few important key metrics, okay? First of all, you get a 5-hour rate limit, and you also get a weekly rate limit, okay? So my 5-hour rate limit at the moment is at 100%. That's simply because I haven't done any coding in here for more than 5 hours, so they have now given me the ability, or the gas tank, if you will, has filled all the way back up to 100% in terms of the amount of coding I can do and conversations I can have internally here with the OpenAI's Codex. So that's great. So that resets every 5 hours, and then you've got a weekly cap. Okay, so this number that you see here is not how much I've used. This continues to go down. So I've used so basically we start off at 100%, and now I've got 63% of my tokens still available for my my subscription. Now again, the amount of coding that I've done over the last few days here has been substantial, very significant amount of coding, okay? Thousands and thousands and thousands of lines as I'm building out the MVP. MVP stands for minimal viable product, okay? It's a buzzword, simply means the bare bones of an application. So I've started building the bare bones of my MVP for my Bitcoin predictor to try to take advantage of basically discrepancies or lags within the probability market, right? So the probability market, as we mentioned before, that's this guy here, right? So for me, the probability market is Kalshi, okay? For a lot of you out there, you may be more familiar with Polymarket. Kalshi is just something that is available to us in the United States, where Polymarket is not directly available to United States citizens. Once again, not giving you financial advice. This is for informational and educational purposes only, primarily around coding. How do you approach AI coding? Okay, so let's take a step back. What I do, okay, before I kick off any project, and what I do as I go along within my project, is I start a conversation with OpenAI, okay, in its normal chat interface, okay? So the screen that I have up right now, this is simply ChatGPT, okay? This is not Codex directly, and it's not Codex through the VS Code plugin, okay? This has no ability to make any direct coding changes to my project in VS Code. But what it does have the ability to do is, in essence, be a senior software engineer that I can have a conversation with to flesh out what my project is going to look like. Now, for those who are not familiar with the terminology, basically what you want to do is you want to figure out the bare bones scaffolding, okay? It's a funny little word, scaffolding. You want to figure out the bare bones for the scaffolding you want or need for your application. Now, do you need to know this in advance, right? Do you need to know this yourself? No. You can work this out with ChatGPT directly. So let me show you what I did, okay? This is the very first conversation that I had with ChatGPT, okay? Again, not coding, but not coding directly. So we started off with this prompt. And I basically said, if you were going to build an analytical control center for the purposes of predicting the price movement of BTC, which is Bitcoin for those who are uninitiated, but I'm guessing most of you know what Bitcoin is by these days, then for the purposes of Bitcoin, within a 15-minute time frame or less, what are the things you would consider ongoing research, correlation of metrics, causation matrices, etc.? Do not lecture me on the risks, okay? That's what this says at the top here for those who may not be able to see it, okay? Now, ChatGPT, now let me also preface this, and this is the number one pieces of advice, or actually about the top 3 pieces of advice that I give everybody and anybody who's willing to listen to me as related to how to use AI. And I don't care whether you're using AI in your job to accomplish some task or multiple tasks, or if you're using it personally or not. The number one thing you need to do in today's world is you need to make sure that if you have the option, and with a paid plan you typically will, you want to make sure you're using the latest model. That's number one. These models are advancing quickly. So you want to make sure you are on the cutting edge of both the ability to reason, okay, and have as much knowledge as possible coming from the model itself, the LLM, okay? And to do that, you want to always make sure you are using the absolute latest version. Now, I will tell you that this is critically important when you are trying to do things that are objective measurements. Coding is very objective. It either works or it doesn't, okay? If you're trying to get it to write you a song, or if you're trying to get it to write you a story, those are non-objective measurements. Okay, you can certainly use a model that maybe is less rigid in terms of its thinking, and that may be a model that is in a lower version. Okay, and there's your tip and trick. Now, the other tip and trick is that you want to always make sure that you're using models that are thinking deeper, thinking longer. So it depends on what platform you're on. They all have a little bit different terminology. So in my case, I am using 5.4. I've got a paid subscription, so that is available to me. And I'm also doing extended thinking. Okay, two very important things. The next, or the third item, third tip I'm going to give you, okay, and this one is, again, really important for you to take away and stick in your back pocket. Consider the humanity test. So what is the humanity test? It's very simple. If the instruction you're about to give the model, okay, is not something that could be understood by another human being, then you need to reconsider the prompt that you're giving it. It's just that simple. If it could not be understood, both in terms of context of what you're asking as well as the general information you're providing, okay, to AI by a human being, then stop, rewrite it, and try it again. Okay, that's called the humanity test. It's very simple, and so think about that when you're interacting with AI in any situation whatsoever, whether you're coding or not. Okay. Now, let's continue to move on in terms of how I got this project kicked off. So I'm kicking this project off in the chat of ChatGPT. Why, right? And why am I doing that? Because I'm not having to pay for the tokens, or it's not costing me or going against my usage of tokens in the actual coding environment. So this allows me to have a detailed conversation, because for the most part, and don't hold me to this, but for the most part, if you're using OpenAI, ChatGPT through their web interface, not through APIs, but just through your regular login ChatGPT, you can have very extensive, long conversations, okay, and not reach any kind of limit, okay, in terms of being blocked on this. And that's the great thing about the way some of these platforms have created the opportunity to use their tools. So I can have this very long conversation. I can go back and forth on it until I come to a point where I'm ready to say, okay, ChatGPT, I'm using the latest model. I'm using deep thinking. I'm using my humanity test that says I am giving you what I believe is my thorough explanation and context of what I'm trying to do. Now, we've had a discussion and we've come to some agreements. Now you write me the prompt I need to hand off to the AI coding agent. I'm going to show you that in a minute. I see, I think the name is Dezas. So can you program an AI agent? You can program pretty much anything. So an agent is the action aspect that AI can take, okay? So in other words, when I refer to a coding agent, right, the plugins for Codex and for Claude Code directly in VS Code, they're doing two things. They are connecting to the large language models that are in the cloud, okay, for each of these platforms, to very specific models. Sometimes you have a choice, sometimes you don't. And then the actual plugin is the agent. It is the code piece that the LLM is interacting with that gives it the ability to run shell commands, okay, to write text, to take content or context like your existing program files and upload those to the cloud so that the LLM can better understand the overall context of what's trying to be done, right? So So in essence, you're using an AI agent, okay, that is provided by these companies. Now, could you have that AI agent, the coding agent, write some other program in order to create an agent to do something else? And let's try to come up with a very simple example. Let's see. A good example would be, let's say you've got a very specific, SaaS application out there, and I can't think of anything offhand, but let's just say there's something that you like, you want to use more. They have an available API to interact with it, and you can get a token to do so, an authorization token to do so, and you want to automate this so that you can have interaction with this SaaS program. Maybe it's contact management software or an email software or something of this nature in your business. You can write your own agent to interact, okay, to do that. You can use this coding agent to write that agent, and then you can deploy that agent, if you will, in another service or with another model that then will go out there and do whatever you have allowed it to do, right? So thanks for subbing. Appreciate that. Always like subs. And again, my whole point with OpenAI is it is the absolute best bargain that is out there when it comes to those who are interested in getting into programming and development with AI. Because VS Code is free. OpenAI, you can get started for $20 a month. You get a lot of coding done with it, okay? But I'm also trying to teach you that you can optimize your coding through first planning through ChatGPT directly, okay? Because this conversation in ChatGPT doesn't go against my coding tokens, if you will. So that's hugely beneficial for people who really want to take advantage of it. And also, don't feel pressure. Don't feel pressure like you have to get all your coding done in one day, or you have to get all your coding done in just a few days because you're going to run out of tokens. So what you can see here on screen here is I began my very initial conversation, right, with ChatGPT to try to plan and structure, okay, basically to come up with a programming brief, okay, of what I wanted to do. And so it had questions for me, and I answered those questions. And now, the one thing about the large language models, AI, it can be a bit verbose, a little wordy. You can always tell it to be less verbose or less wordy. You can tell it something like, always give me a TLDR, right? What's a TLDR? Well, TLDR stands for too long, didn't read. It's kind of the cliff notes of its response. And by the way, thank you whoever invented Cliff Notes, because it got me through school. What do you think of Codex? I love Codex. So that's primarily what we're talking about right now here is Codex. So Codex is really, really good. Using 5.4 is been really successful. Now again, people come in and out of this room, and I appreciate that. Appreciate the hearts, appreciate the love, appreciate it all. Feel free to drop questions, comments, and I will do my best to try to answer. Hello, Zeke. Welcome back again. You are one of my most faithful live viewers. If I had something I would give you, I'd give it to you, but I'm still figuring that part out. So OpenAI, Codex, fantastic, right? But here's the thing, is like I said, you don't want to run out of tokens. So you can plan in ChatGPT, and that's exactly what I did here, as I planned and planned and planned. Okay, now it came back with information. I'm asking another question. We continue to plan. It comes back more, okay, and we continue. Now, if we look at, let me go jump up to my project here. Okay. So that was the initial planning. Now we're getting into some guts here as soon as this opens up. So again, highly recommend using projects. If you have a ChatGPT account and you're using, you're going to want to create yourself a project, right? So a project is nothing more than coming over here to the what they call the drawer on the left hand side here. Find projects. Again, I'm not sure if this is available to you for free, but it is if you're on a paid subscription. You can create a new project, and then you can save your conversations and any type of attachments you want to include within that same project. And that's really beneficial because it allows the AI to stay focused on your topics for that specific conversation. So every time I come back to this project, what I'm doing is I'm basically picking up where I left off. Zeke, you don't have to do that. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I hope you're doing well in the South there. The the key thing here is that long conversations, right? Now, this was my second conversation that I picked up here. So notice how I'm speaking here in terms of my prompt. Okay, this is really important. Some people get so kind of tongue-tied when it comes to interaction with AI because they think they're interacting with a machine and they want to speak like a machine. You don't have to speak like a machine. You need to speak like a human, okay? So I say, here are some general thoughts regarding the BTC, the Bitcoin short-term price move indicator to buy contracts on Kelshi. And I'm starting to, after I had my first initial conversation, and it gave me a lot of ideas, I'm like, okay, I've got some ideas, okay? So I'm sharing my ideas in terms of broadly, what would this project look like, right? Where do I start with this thing? Now, again, I've got 30 years of tech experience, so I have some understanding of what I'm asking for and what I want, okay? And that's really important. And I know it's, if you don't have that understanding, there's ways of being able to get some of that basic understanding, okay? And we can talk about that at another point in time. But if you notice here, what I'm saying is I'm basically saying, okay, I'm looking for creating a predictor. I'm providing some details here in terms of my thoughts of what would work, what would be important to have included in this application. And its initial response is, okay, it says, I'm going to frame this as a two-system architecture, ultra fast deterministic execution on one side, heavier analysis and learning on the other. Now, this was interesting to me. I was thinking, okay, so first of all, I'm not a software engineer. I'm what they call a jack of all trades when it comes to technology. I've been a consultant or a solutions architect for nearly 30 years. It's not the same as a software engineer. There's a lot of variances in the tech world in terms of different roles and how people fill them and what they actually do. Some people code all day long, and that's all that they do. Some people are full stack developers. They understand everything from front end to back end to middleware and everything in between. Others are only back end developers. They don't understand anything about a UI or UX experience. Okay, so it varies considerably. In my case, I'm a jack of all trades because I've been in the business for 30 years. I understand enough to know what to ask. And this is where I cannot stress enough. And if you look at me and think I'm insane, you just need to listen. And that is the fact that if you have some technical ability, you have been given the greatest gift and opportunity of your lifetime. I guarantee you, okay? Because you now, for pennies, right? For pennies, for $20 a month, as I'm talking about here with OpenAI, and again, I'm not selling anything, nor do I get any cut of it, or is this a sponsored video? But for $20 a month, you, as somebody who may have some technical ability, who wants to pursue something technical, now has the ability to do so in such a way that you never had before, okay? With this particular application that I'm developing, I got a working MVP basically up and running within, a day and a half. It would have taken months and months and months of work, not to mention, do I think I would have had even all the necessary skill sets to achieve it? Probably not. I would have had to do a lot of research and study and try to piece things together myself. So back to ChatGPT, we're having this conversation. We're starting to flesh out What is this design brief going to look like? What do I need to consider? Now, one of the things that I found interesting, and let me tell you this up front for anybody who, again, is willing to listen. If you think AI is going to make the world dumber, or if you think AI is going to make you dumber, then you honestly aren't paying attention. And I don't mean to sound too harsh, but that's the reality. AI has made me smarter. In the process of using it, and again, I use it 10 to 11 to 12 hours a day now, and I've been involved with it pretty heavily for 2.5 years, 3 years. I am learning things from a technical perspective that I have not learned in 30 years, and it's mind-blowing, okay? So, and how does that happening? Well, it's happening because it's coming back to me with concepts or with terminology. And I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? I've never heard that word before within the technical world. And again, I've been in this thing for nearly 30 years. Where's that coming from, right? What does the word mean? Why are we saying this? Or in this particular case of this application, as an example, it came back and I thought, okay, we're talking about kind of discrete services here, where this overall Bitcoin predictor service or Bitcoin predictor solution or system, okay, which again, cute little name of the cute little name, Signal Harbor. And again, I can't take credit for that Signal Harbor name. That was actually a name that AI came up with on its own. But when I was having the discussion to try to figure out how the services for this thing was going to run, I was thinking to myself, based upon what I know, okay, let's do 3 or 4 different projects, okay? One for the analysis part, one for the UI dashboard part, one for the data ingestion part, one for the execution part. And I thought, okay, we're going to have 3 or 4 different VS Code projects, right? And in that conversation, it came back and said, no. That's not good architecture, okay? It's better to be under what it referred to as a mono repo. So that was a nice word, right? Mono meaning one, repo meaning repository, single repo. Okay, great. So a single repo is what it's recommending. Now I'm like, okay, great. Let's continue to flesh this out, right? And I'm saying, well, how are we going to do this with multiple services, right? Because I know enough to know that if you're trying to run multiple services simultaneously, there's challenges there. So it already had told me earlier, we're not going to make this too complicated. Okay, this is an MVP. It's going to be mainly for personal use. So we don't want to make this too complicated. We're not going to use anything like a containerization like Kubernetes. So we're going to keep this simple. Then later on, it came back and it mentioned something regarding Docker. And for those who are not familiar with concepts of containerization or Docker or Kubernetes, this is all related to the containerization of software, okay? So now I'm scratching my head because I'm thinking, we just had a discussion. We talked about not using Kubernetes. Now you're telling me that in terms of my software stack that we're going to utilize Docker for the services. So what do? I ask it. I say, wait. Now let's see. I'm trying to see if I have here the specific comment. It's in here somewhere. But basically I asked it, I said, hey, I thought we were not doing containerization. It comes back to me and it says, that's an interesting question and very insightful. But a lot of people don't realize Docker is the perfect way to containerize for the purposes of services when you have multiple services that you need to run simultaneously for the purposes of interaction or intercommunication between these services, if you will. So again, my whole point being, in the business for 30 years, I learned something new because I am asking questions. It's responding. I'm following up by asking more questions. And I'm treating it honestly like I'm having a conversation with a senior software engineer. okay, or the best software engineer in the world. And if you know software engineers, and I have known many of them over my time in the business, they're not always the nicest people. Some of them have a lot of arrogance. So it's really nice to be able to have a conversation with somebody or something that has such an in-depth knowledge of technology, especially when it comes to software development, and at the same time get some real feedback. So that is my little story. So let's go down this road here. Again, Bitcoin. It is probability market, okay? Whether this thing's going to close up or down over a specific strike price during a 15-minute period of time. Came up with this brilliant idea, I thought. Why not develop a system, okay, that I can use to try to predict where the price is going to go. And it's less about the price directly and more about the probability that the price is going to close above or below a certain level. So there's a whole lot of variances here because you've got to take into consideration the data feed that the probability market's using versus the spot data feed coming from like Coinbase. So there's a lot of variances here and nuances. But guess what? I've got the smartest software engineer in the world, literally in my pocket, to be able to ask these questions and to flesh out these details, okay? Now, one of the things that I did in my process here is I gave it direct access to the Kelshi API documentation, because Kelshi actually has a public available API as well as private APIs for accounts that you can interact with, and that is fantastic. So this is really good example here. So this was where we were talking about scaffolding the project. So here I'm responding, I agree with a single project, but multi-services, which is what I was just talking about a moment ago. Now I'm telling it, write me a prompt to properly scaffold the project in VS Code using Codex or Claude Code. Now I use both. The primary one that I've used to build all of this initially has been Codex. But I also have Claude Code, and I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing can be handed off between these two, okay? So one of the other key things is that when you're getting prompt, you should always include a tag that basically says, if you have questions or something is not clear, then ask me, okay? And that can often lead to it asking some follow-up questions that help flesh out some more details before you get your final prompt. So it went ahead and it gave me the prompt that I needed right here, okay, to scaffold the initial project. Now, why is this so great from my perspective? It's very simple. I just had thousands of tokens, back and forth conversations. Remember, tokens is what they charge for, both inputs and outputs. This is how the AI models and the LLM and the AI companies, this is how they charge, okay, through tokens. So I've just had a conversation, thousands of tokens back and forth, fleshing out a design brief for what I'm trying to accomplish. And in essence, it didn't cost me anything more than my $20 subscription to OpenAI, okay? And it didn't cost me valuable tokens in terms of coding tokens, for lack of a better word. So we got that information. I got that. I took that and I put that into, literally copy it. I always ask it for a prompt, okay, that I can copy that has no other garbage around it. And what I mean by garbage is if you're not really clear, all of this might end up into an output that you have to kind of decide what you're pulling out for the prompt, what you're not pulling out for the prompt. So if you give it very clear instructions, you'll get this nice little window with its nice little individual copy command, okay, where you can say copy, and it's just going to copy this prompt, okay, this very specific prompt. And then you're going to take that and you're going to put that into your VS Code. So that's exactly what I did when I did my initial scaffolding here. So this was my initial scaffold. If I go all the way back up here, you'd see the prompt. But notice how long this conversation is here. Not even to the top yet. Okay, and there's a prompt. So all the way to the top if I can get there. Okay, so there you go. So the prompt I was just showing you, right? Copied it, pasted it here into Codex. I set my settings down here accordingly to what I was comfortable with. Now, when you're working with AI agents and you're working with them in something like VS Code, and well, let me just say this. When you're working with AI agents and you're working in something like VS Code, it's up to you how much permissions you give these agents to interact with your local environment, okay? Now, the difference between, and I won't go down a rabbit hole in terms of OpenClaw, but if you heard of OpenClaw, OpenClaw is, well, let's just say OpenClaw gives way too much permissions to access everything and anything on your system, okay, on your computer basically. And that's a really bad, excuse me, that's a really bad idea. What I do here is, I give full access, okay, or default permissions access to Codex, depending on what I'm trying to do. Now, I knew with scaffolding, okay, that scaffolding is going to involve writing a bunch of code, okay. It's going to be creating lots of structure, okay, in terms of program structure. It's also going to be installing a lot of required libraries, whether they're in the primary language that we are coding in here. You'll see right here, it is using a variety of different technologies in terms of the software stack, okay? So Next.js, it's using Python, it's using TypeScript, it's using PostgreSQL, it's doing some container orchestration through Docker, okay? So there's a lot of different types of libraries that need to be downloaded and installed for the scaffolding to be successful. So for that, I gave it full access because I just don't like to have to click through every time something pops up and says, do you want to allow this? Do you want to allow this? You know, it becomes quite annoying. So the so in doing so, it just speeds things up a little bit for me. Again, if you got questions, comments, drop them in chat. I'm happy to try to answer them for you. So we got our scaffolding done, right? It was a long prompt. And now, what's the next thing Joe does? Well, here's what I do. Because I want to conserve my tokens that I'm using here within Codex for VS Code, okay? I want, for me, the work that's done here within the VS Code environment, okay, the IDE environment, and specifically the Codex plugin, this is high value work, okay? High value work. And what do I mean by that? This is going to cost me tokens, right? But like I said, with a $20 subscription, I get a lot of them, but still, as you can see, I'm down to, if you look at my screen, you look at my rate limits, right? I'm down to basically 63%, and I'm not going to get a refresh on my weekly tokens until April 2nd. So because I consider this high value work that's occurring here, I want to try to keep in sync the ChatGPT conversation, okay, with the Codex coding agent. So what do I do? How do I make that happen? Well, the ChatGPT, right, it wrote the prompt. So what do I do? When the prompt is completed, it always will output a summary of what it's done, okay, and some details, and potentially any issues that it ran into. And it comes along with this handy dandy little copy icon. So I copy that, easy enough to do, and then I paste it into my ChatGPT conversation, okay? Now, also notice something here in this example. I got the scaffolding information and then, or the scaffolding prompt, but then I saw down here, before I proceed, I had a question. What if I want to expand beyond BTC, which is Bitcoin, to another crypto or another prediction market like weather? What's your recommendation? So now I'm thinking, as I'm building this out as a predictor of predictors, right? Do I need to think about this up front? Should this be taken into consideration during the initial kind of architecture considerations of this application, right? So still all through Kalshi in terms of where I'd be actually executing these trades, okay? And it came back with some information that was pretty useful. There are variations in terms of how different things are handled from a contract level perspective. And at the end of the day, you know, it gives you sometimes something like this, which is pretty useful. My blunt recommendation: design the project so it can expand beyond BTC, but do not optimize the first strategy to handle every market type. So that was pretty useful, and I came back and said something. Okay, update the scaffolding prompt details to support this flexible strategy, but for the MVP, we will focus on Bitcoin. Okay, and then it came back and it gave me my updated prompt. And so after it ran the prompt, I also asked it about a suggested project name because I hadn't created the project name yet. And that's where Signal Harbor came from. In fact, it gave me a bunch of names and it said, oh, Signal Harbor, that sounds like a good idea. So that's what I did. So after the results, right, as I was just mentioning before, I copied the results from the scaffolding, pasted them in here, and now it comes back and says, that's a strong scaffold, the blunt version. You now have a credible platform skeleton, right? So again, really important to understand, guys, girls, is that what I'm doing here, okay, is I'm trying to optimize my ability to do a few things. Number one, I'm trying to optimize my use of the high value or the high cost AI interactions or agents, right? Because those cost money, they cost tokens, right? And so my $20 gets me a lot of those tokens, but I want to use those for the high value work, right? The high value work is not about me having a conversation back and forth trying to figure out what I want to do, right? And asking questions like, wait, I've never heard that term before, right? Can you explain that to me? That's going to cost me coding tokens. This, through ChatGPT, right, the web interface, doesn't cost me coding tokens, but gives me the same valuable information to be able to make decisions, narrow down design choices before I then hand that off to the coding agent. And more importantly, before I hand it off to the coding agent, I'm able to flesh out those details in this conversation and then ask ChatGPT very specifically, write me the prompt, right? Write me the prompt to accomplish what we just talked about. And then I take that and hand it off to the coding agent. So now the high value work is focused. It's focused on that specific prompt and all the details. Now, there are some exceptions here that I'll talk about in a moment, and I see there's a question. How does the codecs in VS differ from the desktop app, if at all? Are you referring to... So codecs, comes in a variety of flavors now. If you're doing anything in codecs, whether it is through the cloud version, so I've actually got a video on my channel that I did a while back. There was a loophole that OpenAI had open for a while that basically they didn't count the tokens you were using in the cloud. So if you were using codecs in the cloud, they weren't counting those tokens against my usage. They clearly were coming from a different bucket. So if I offloaded certain things to the cloud, that token usage didn't go against my rate limit that I had. They have since closed that loop. Okay, so now regardless of whether I'm asking for work to be done in the cloud or I'm asking for it to be done locally, it's still costing me tokens or using tokens as related to my limits that I have with this particular subscription, right? So anything you do in OpenAI's codecs, regardless of the interface, is going to go against your rate limit for whatever subscription you have in terms of using codecs. Hopefully that helps. Now, as far as using it within VS Code versus other platforms, I like VS Code. I like to be able to see the structure of my project. I like to be able to interact with it. Sometimes I click on certain files to examine what's inside of them. Sometimes I update, like my environmental variable file, I update that directly myself more often than not. So hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, drop another comment and I will try to answer it for you again. Okay, so hopefully you're beginning to understand the benefits here of working with basically the same model, okay, through two different interfaces, being able to really take advantage of your subscription and maximizing its benefit for your purposes. So I would strongly recommend doing that. Let's see here. I'm just double checking time here for a second. Give me 1 second here. I'm sorry, I'm just catching up on something here. Give me just 1 second. Again, for anybody who is watching so we're streaming on YouTube and we're streaming on TikTok and streaming on X. If you are watching this on vertical, we do have simultaneous stream happening on the landscape or the main channel of YouTube. And if you're on TikTok and you're not aware, should be a little button there that says view full screen, and that full screen should allow you to turn your phone horizontally and you can see these screens a whole lot better. Okay, so that's the benefit of working with two different interfaces, in essence the same product. One that is actually the coding agent, right? And that's the important thing to understand. When you're in the IDE, VS Code, and you're using codecs, that is the coding agent itself that allows you to not only interact with it, but again, you're allowing it to make direct changes to your environment, to your program. So let's move on to where I left off. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to go and I'm going to spin up my current application that I have here. Again, ask your questions. I will do my best to try to answer them. I'll walk you through. I'm also going to try to paint a picture for you here in terms of what I'm doing. So we're back into VS Code. We have our Codex agent on the side. It's asking for I thought I already gave that. Give me 1 second. Introducing, and one thing you'll find out about the AI models and the AI services is they are constantly updating. They're rolling out new features, and new options. I mean, honestly, probably every few days. It's a bit annoying, but it's also beneficial. Right. So I'm getting my little screen here that's coming up and saying Frontier Intelligence 1.5, the speed. So this is Codex related. Introducing fast mode based on your work last week across 2 threads. Fast could have saved about 2 hours and 27 minutes. Use the 2x plan usage. And to be honest, this is new to me because I'm not really sure what this is related to. So let's turn on the fast and see what happens. Now that I've clicked on that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to check my VS Code layout here. Okay. And I'm going to move let me move this over. Let's see, that's blocking. Okay. I'm going to double check my settings down here. So the model I'm using is still 5.4. That is the latest and greatest. Okay. They seem to have stopped defining Codex as the name in some of these models when they got to 5.4. And that's one of the other things that's honestly pretty annoying. I've heard Sam Altman and some other people talk about it. OpenAI, the way they name their stuff and the way they keep changing the names is honestly pretty annoying. But some of the other AI platforms are the same way. I don't really know why. I work for a large software company. I can't say we're probably not much better. Version names, brand names, product names, they all seem to keep wanting to change. So want to make sure I'm still using 5.4, which I am. I had done most of my programming on using Medium for the reasoning, but I bumped it up to high recently. And I did that because I knew I was doing some complex analytical, or I should say algorithm updates, and I wanted to make sure that I had extra reasoning kind of associated with what I believed was going to be more complex program to solve. Now, I will also tell you this, is that I ran into a defect in my solution. You're welcome for the valuable information. Appreciate you jumping in and asking questions. The key thing about so I ran into a defect in my product or the application I'm building. And by the way, it's not it's not a SaaS. It's at least for now, I'm intending to use it exclusively for myself. And so therefore, there are certain let me take a quick step back. When you think about developing an application, right? It's important to understand who you're developing that application for. And what I mean by that is, if you're developing an application to be a true SaaS, okay, SaaS, that's software as a service for those who may not know, then you need to take things into consideration like multi-tenancy, multi-users within tenants, and how you're going to manage the back end in terms of data privacy, data encryption, security, all authentication. There's a whole host of things that go into trying to plan for a true SaaS architecture. Okay. Now, if you're developing an application for your sole use, okay, even if you were to want to sell it as kind of an independent deliverable or installation, excuse me, pardon me. But if you were going to develop it again as a kind of a personal piece of software to use, you don't have to worry about authentication, right? Because you're not having to worry about anybody logging in except for yourself. And so why put the extra layer of security on there if you don't need to? Because you can always shut it down when you're not using it, right? Which makes it secure. Other things you don't need to concern yourself too much about is things around encryption, row level security, a whole host of things. So it's important to understand, and also, again, going back to conversations you need to have in terms of your planning, is you need to have conversations around what's the intent of kind of the distribution aspect of your software or your solution. Are you intended to distribute it like a SaaS, right? Internet-based, etc. Or is it going to be something that you maybe compile into something that's downloadable, that is then just going to be executable on somebody's desktop? Or is it going to be more of a business application? Or is it just a one-off project that you want to build and get up and running as fast as possible for your purposes, so that you can use it and play with it and continue to evolve it, if you will. These are all kind of considerations you should have in mind. Earlier the better, so that you don't over design or you don't under design. Okay, so let's move on back to what I was talking about here. So that was an interesting pop-up that I got. I answered fast. Not 100% sure what that means, but I know somebody I can ask to find out. But what I want to do is double check, did my reasoning change? No. Did my model change? No. Are we still using the context from the IDE? Yes. I currently have full access set. I'm going to change that back to default permissions for now. And you can see that I'm working with local project. And if I double check my rate limits, again, still at 100% for the 5 hours and at 63% for the weekly. Okay, so let's move on to spinning up these services. And for some reason, it still wants my passphrase. This is kind of unusual. Give me a second. I had already entered it in the WSL. I don't know why it wants it again. Okay, so we are in. For anybody who doesn't know, actually the reason for that prompt that I got is actually related to the fact that my connection to GitHub is secure. Security is something you definitely want to keep in mind anytime you're working with these environments. Don't just ignore it. Make sure you are using best practices in terms of security. And if you don't know what that is, once again, I know somebody you can ask. And who am I referring to? Well, I'm referring to AI. So 2 questions, right? Well, first question, I'm not going to ask about the security question, but if you're not sure about security or things around security, you go to ChatGPT or one of the other AI models and use the most advanced model and deep thinking and have a conversation around it. You will learn a lot. It's the best teacher in the world, in my opinion. But so I just, had this screen that came up that said something about fast. So I'm going to ask I just logged into VS Code, and I have Codex plugin. Saw a prompt saying I should or could use a fast feature of Codex. What is that, or what does it mean? So typically I don't worry too much about typos. Sometimes I correct them, but typically it figures it out. And let's see, because that was a new prompt to me. So let's see, I'm checking. In Codex, fast means a higher speed service tier, not a different workflow. On current OpenAI docs, fast mode speeds GPT 5.4 up 5.4 up by about 1.5x, but it consumes credits at 2 times the normal rate. It's available in the Codex ID extension, the Codex CLI, and the Codex app when you sign in to ChatGPT. If you use an API, so plain English prompt will tell you that you can make Codex respond to work faster, but you'll burn through. Okay, so that's a bad idea. So let's see how to change it. So anybody out there for YouTube or X or anything in between, TikTok? We're streaming on TikTok, streaming on X, and streaming on YouTube. YouTube longs, YouTube shorts. You got questions, comments, drop them in. I'm happy to try to answer them for you, give you any kind of insight or guidance. Again, what we're doing really here is focusing on prompt-led development, okay, not vibe coding. If you say vibe coding, I'll slap you. I mean that in jest, but I hate the term. Hate the term. Anybody in the tech world pretty much hates the term. Only those people who are trying to sell you the dream of being able to create whatever you want with vibe coding. From my experience and my opinion is, it's like any kind of hype. It's bullshit. I try to keep a no bullshit channel. It's kind of my motto. Really? So you're telling me that to change this, you got to be kidding me. Well, okay. So I am going to stop sharing my screen for a moment because I'm not sure what's going to come up, so that I can see if I can change this back, because unfortunately I do not want to burn through all my credits. So this is a good example though, where you click on something that you don't fully understand, and if I didn't fully understand it, I would, or I should say, if I didn't stop and do a little research on this, I'd end up burning through all these credits very quickly and would kind of defeat my purpose of what I've been trying to explain to everybody. So give me a second. I gotta switch out my screens here a little bit. Okay, sorry. If you got questions, comments, drop them in. I will do my best to try to answer them for you. Um, bu- 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 So basically, I'm asking, how do I change it for the plugin within VS Code? How much would you say someone should expect to spend on credits when making a SaaS project? So I mean, that's the key thing here, right? If you sign up for OpenAI's Plus account, that's where I'm blown away. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of coding that you can get done, especially if you use this technique that I'm sharing with you guys, right? Where you do a lot of planning, right? And you do a lot of decisions in ChatGPT using basically the same model, but you're not being charged for those tokens. And then have it write the prompt for your coding agent. Then you're going to have a whole lot less waste, or what some people might call slippage, in terms of those tokens. But it's also going to largely depend on what you are trying to create in terms of a SaaS project. So when it comes to SaaS, the very first thing you need to do is just kind of map out in your mind what it is that you want. And I can tell you from experience, when it comes to web applications or any kind of application, as soon as you involve a user, right? You've got UIs and you've got the UX. The UX is the user experience. That user experience ends up spawning many different possible journeys that user can go down within an application. So the mistake that some people make is they're trying to put everything into their first version or their MVP, minimal viable product. Okay, some people call it a proof. You can call it many different things, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to put everything into one all at once, that's a mistake. You need to, again, break it down into, in essence, phases, right? And then roll out the features and the functions phase by phase, and then just build over time that. So it's hard to nail it down in terms of what it will actually cost you. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, if you want me to put a number on it, $20. And again, I don't get anything for this. I'm not selling OpenAI, but sign up for an OpenAI subscription for $20. You get access to Codex. You can set up the exact same environment you saw me have. You're going to get a substantial number of tokens. You use the technique that I have suggested of doing your planning, doing your structuring, doing your design brief, fleshing all of that out in ChatGPT, not Codex directly. Have it write the prompt for Codex, and then you implement that within Codex. You are going to get a much longer runway in terms of building out that SaaS project. The other thing is that you can break this out into pieces. In other words, if somebody said, I want to create a SaaS, I have an idea, but I'm not really clear on exactly everything that I want, which is typically the case, then I would say go and open a project, create a project in ChatGPT, and you can also do this in Gemini or Claude Code or any of the other AIs that you want in most cases, and just begin to have a conversation. I am so and so. This is my relative skill set. I'm thinking that I would like to create a certain type of application to do XYZ. Here are some things I have in mind. I want to have a conversation about this and flesh out, the various design details, as well as I want to begin to flesh out how would this look in terms of the phases, right? What would we think about for phase one? And it will, all the models at this point in time, as long as you're using the latest version of these models with deep thinking, they will have a very extensive planning conversation with you. Now, you can have that in a whatever AI model you want or whatever platform you want. But then when you boil that down and narrow it down to what you want, right, and what you've agreed upon and what you think is going to meet your initial needs, you then ask that specific AI that you're having a conversation with to write you a design brief, okay? So that you can take that design brief and then you can hand that off to the next AI model, whether it's the same one in a new session or whether it's a new one in another session like ChatGPT, and you can hand off the design brief and say, this is where we're starting, right? That's probably the biggest, well, a lot of big tips, but one of my key tips that I try to tell everybody who will listen is you have to sometimes break larger problems down into smaller components. Call them steps, call them tasks, call them whatever you want. But if you break out down larger problems into more discrete components, and then you attack each of those components kind of independently, you will find that you will come up with a much better solution for the overall problem and typically save yourself some time, aggravation, and money in the process. This live will be one line, the first time here for Dominican Republican. Hello, DR. Welcome, welcome. No, I actually, I will be doing, I do lives actually. I will admit that I'm not completely consistent in terms of my lives. I do lives though fairly often. Been building some social media stuff on YouTube and TikTok and X. But I do like sharing, so this is not going to be a one-time. But I will be honest in terms of trying to focus as much value as I can in terms of lives. And yes, this live will be uploaded onto, or it will be available on YouTube. And I've got the same. I've got the same handle pretty much on everything. Solutions Joe. If you search for Solutions Joe on any of the YouTube, X, or TikTok, you'll find it. Okay, so I'm sorry. I got to get back to trying to fix my fast mode here. Why is this doing this to me? Okay, I found it. So let me share with everybody. I can share this out. Okay, let's me get my screens back up and running here. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Again, anybody who's on YouTube Shorts, it's pretty hard to see these screens on there. Feel free to jump over to the YouTube main channel. You're going to get a much better view. Let me double check my TikTok. Okay, back to TikTok. Okay, so if you've been following along and you've been here for a little while, you'll remember I clicked on something I shouldn't have clicked on, and that was the fast mode. So the configuration file here, the config toml, influences codecs in terms of how it behaves. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this out. I'm going to head over to, now technically I could probably use the codecs agent to make a change here, but then I'm going to be burning through the tokens for coding, which I don't really want to do. So I'm going to head back over to my ChatGPT here, okay, and I'm going to copy this in, which is the config toml, and see if it can help me figure out how to turn off this fast. And welcome everybody in. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So I gave it my config tuml file, which is what Codex is using. So it says I'm verifying the exact codec keys from the official docs. Then I'll show you the smallest safe edit. Okay, yes. For your Codex plugin VS Code, the simplest change is to add the fast settings to this same config tuml. The Codex ID extension uses the shared Codex config and OpenAI documents fast mode as being persisted. Okay, so features. Okay, if you want fast available but not forced by default, use this. Okay, if you want fast completely disabled, change the end to this. That's what I want. Okay. So hopefully that'll take effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close my VS Code. I'm going to launch it again. So again, I'm a consultant. As a consultant, I don't believe in any silly or stupid questions. Ask whatever you like. I will do my best to answer. I will also try to give you some step-by-steps in terms of what I'm doing here. Not necessarily to replicate what I'm doing, but you're certainly welcome to try. But some understanding and concept of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So currently I'm working on a Windows desktop. It's what I work on. But I like working within a Linux environment when I'm doing my VS Code and my programming. It's just a better environment. It's more stable. It's there's more libraries and things of this nature for it. It's also just simply more efficient. Now within this environment, it is a Linux environment, and so the commands here are going to be different than just standard window commands or PowerShell commands. Now where I'm at right now is simply within a project folder on my Windows subsystem of Linux. And I'm going to launch my VS Code. And the way that I do that from the command line here is I simply do code dot. And what this says is this says to the underlying system, open up VS Code and don't select any specific file when I do. Okay. And then this is going to launch, and in we're going to come. Okay, and if all goes well, we should be no longer fast mode. Now, I will say that if you, in my particular case, I am going to ask it if we are in fast mode. Let's just see what it has to say. Are we in, let's say, is Codex in fast mode? No, fast mode is set to false. Okay, good. So this workspace is not configured for fast mode. Thank you. Okay, so that's a good thing. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to archive that guy. Okay, so getting into this, back into this project. Now, I had spun up services before I closed down, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to try to stop those services so that I can spin them back up again. I'm going to let that shut those services down. Okay, so what are we doing? What's the point of my project here? So again, been in the tech business for nearly 30 years, and I got the bright idea just a few days ago and thought it would be good to share kind of a public journey on what could I do in terms of developing a system that would allow me to get an edge in trading within the predictability market with a market, or so the terminology that they use within the probability markets is kind of interesting. So you've got an event. The event happens to be Bitcoin, and then you've got the market that they make associated with the Bitcoin. So I'll just use generically the term market. So this particular market is the Bitcoin, and whether it's going to be up or down within the next 15 minutes, okay, based on a specific strike price. And the specific strike price here is, let's see, let me refresh the screen, it should come. The specific strike price is 66,790. Anyways, all that doesn't really matter. If you're not familiar with this, the bottom line is this is for U.S. citizens, this is legal and accessible, and it's a predictability market where it basically says you can buy a contract based on whether you think the price is going to close above or below that strike price. And depending on whether that price closes above or below determines on whether you get paid or not. So I see another question. How long have you been working on this Bitcoin predictor? Do you have a timeline for when you want it to be complete? Great question. So to be honest, I started it this week. Started it, I think probably Wednesday. Today's Saturday. I think I started it probably Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday evening after work, I think I started on it. And the reason is because I had heard about the probability markets before. Again, I'm a big fan of, so I'm a little bit older than I look, by the way, not to sound vain, but just because I've got a number of years on me. So I watch CNBC typically in the mornings when I'm eating my breakfast and getting ready for my 9-to-5 job. And, they talk about the poly markets and the probability markets all the time, along with, of course, the stock markets and Bitcoin and everything else. So I had heard about it, knew about it for probably the last year or two, whatever. Decided to log into Polymarket, and then when I found out that basically Polymarket's not directly available to U.S. citizens, I did a little research, found out Kalshi's been around for a long time. It's trustworthy. It's I think U.S. based, and as a U.S. citizen, I can get access to it. So I thought, let me take a look at this and see what it's about. Again, being a tech person, anybody out there who's a technical person, we tend to be a lot alike. We have brains that are very objective in our thinking and very kind of technical in our thinking, mathematical in our thinking, if you will, very logic based. I'm like, this is quite interesting. Now, this is not about trying to sell you Bitcoin, because that's not what I'm doing. I want to be very, very clear. Not providing financial advice. This is strictly informational, educational around prompt-led development using AI tools to develop a software system that honestly, even with my 30 years in tech, would take me, months and months and months to build and then probably end up with something not nearly as good as I have got just in a couple of days here. So with this, I looked at this platform and I'm like, well, this is interesting. Maybe there's an opportunity here. At the very least, there's an opportunity for me to explore an AI project that might serve me, or would just at least provide me with more insight in terms of AI development. So got into this, started playing with it, and nice thing about Kalshi is they have APIs for everything that you need, whether it is getting the data or whether it is updating your trades or monitoring your trades. All that is available through their APIs, which is fantastic. And then I did some research on other things. So when I say research, what did I do? Well, again, want to be really clear. I came to my project that I had put into ChatGPT, and I had this conversation. I said, this is what I'm seeing, right? This is what I'm thinking about. This is the solution. You know, is there a way of creating a system here that might give us an edge in terms of the prediction? What about the data, right? Data is gold, right? You probably heard that before. In today's world, data of all sorts is gold. And the funny thing about data is in some cases, there's a lot of data that is completely free and available to take advantage of. You don't have to do web scraping, which, by the way, may or may not be legal, depending on where you're doing it and what you're doing it to. Pardon me, I'm back. But this is not about web scraping. This is about using valid and authenticated APIs for getting the data needed for building the system. And so again, had this conversation, you know, in ChatGPT extensively, fleshing out what this basic MVP would look like, and you know, determining where the data feeds available. Are they free? Because to be honest, I didn't really want to pay for any data, at least not initially. And most of the data, especially around the crypto world, believe it or not, is free because of its quote unquote open source aspect. So that was the good news. So what did I do? So let's take a look here. Let me spin up my software again here, my application. Again, if you got questions or comments, feel free to drop them in. I will do my best to give you some insights, at least as I see them. And I'm not giving you financial advice. Yeah, this is strictly for educational entertainment purposes only. Okay. So, again, for the tech heads out there, this is pretty interesting. So what we did is we just spun up multiple services. So if I continue along with sharing kind of the building and public aspect, I'll probably create some diagrams so you can better understand. But you can see here, I just spun up all the services, okay? And the services are a couple of different things, or not a couple, actually multiple things. First of all, we have a container that we spun up for Postgres, and Postgres is a database. There's many different databases out there these days. Postgres is a very popular open source database. So this is what we've implemented for persistence behind the scene. Okay, we have Redis that has also been implemented in a container. We also have a service. Now this is a custom service that has been built as part of the solution here, and that is that's this one here, which is the ingest step, okay, or the ingest service. And then we also have the analysis service. We also have an execution service, and we have a service that is for the dashboard. And this is where I talked about before that you need to think about these things. You need to try to break them down, and you don't have to be on your own. Again, I'm at this point I'm going to jump up and down on my seat, screaming and yelling to the top of the mountain for people to listen, because if you have some technical ability, or you are just driven to begin to embrace technology, right, especially around software development, you are not in any better place at any time in this world than you are today to be able to take advantage of it. Okay. In following up the other question, when do I think it's going to be complete? I've got something fairly functional now. I'm going to bring up the dashboard on it. So again, I'm going to walk you through some VS Code stuff, just kind of so you guys can follow along and have some insight in terms of what's happening here. So all my services spun up, which is great. Okay, I can see now I've got multiple ports that are operational behind the scenes here, open. I've got some things that are dead I'm going to get rid of here. These are just leftovers. Okay, so I've got my service ports, and I've got some other backend ports that are open and running. We're going to go to the browser, and here we are. So this is not the way the application first looked. This is actually so this is not the way the application first looked. It actually is been updated in terms of what I'm referring to as the UI. So, when you're developing applications like this, as you saw, I've got multiple backend services that have no UI directly for them, and they don't need them. The analysis piece does not need a UI, but ultimately you need a UI and a UX to have a human in the loop process, if you will, whether you just want to see what's going on or understanding some of the gain some insight in terms of what these services are actually doing behind the scenes and what metrics they are potentially coming out with, right? So welcome everybody. Thank you on TikTok. Love the hearts. Really appreciate it. If you got questions, comments, drop them in there. What is this, brother? This is this is me building in public, basically. So I call it PLD, prompt-led development, not vibe coding. Hate the term vibe coding. I'm a tech person, been in the business for 30 years, solutions architect, and started building just the other day what I call the Signal Harbor. And it's basically, as you can see on screen there, a Bitcoin predictor. Now, it's not about predicting where Bitcoin's going to go, and I'm not trying to sell you Bitcoin. I'm not offering you financial advice. That's not what this is about. This is about understanding the power that AI can give somebody, especially if you've got some technical chops, okay? And what you can potentially do with it. So, what am I doing with it? I am building out this application, and we can see we've got multiple services. So if we look at this right now, and this is basically the main dashboard, and like I said, it's gone through several iterations, because sometimes AI will build out the UIs and it'll just keep adding stuff to the UI as it surfaces new metrics or KPIs or whatever you want to call the underlying data points, okay? And it can become a mess, which it did. So what did I do when it became a mess? Well, what I actually did when it became a mess is, and I can maybe show this to you, when the UI became a mess, and this was actually late last night that I was doing this, I think. Where is my screen? Let me close this down so I can stay in one. Okay, so there's the Bitcoin probability. Let's bring this back up again. Okay. So when this comes up, it takes a second, and what happens is it will update the information. And this is all happening through live data feeds. So the main data feeds that I'm using here is data coming from Kalshi directly, okay, through their publicly available API. You still so they do have some public APIs that you can take advantage of in terms of getting data. And then they also have a so there's two different types of ways to feed data. Again, I'll try to explain the technicalities here, but it's definitely things you need to kind of be aware of and take into consideration should you be building any kind of application that really depended upon data. So one of those is, hello guys, welcome. I'm feeling great today. Thank you, Sheriff. Hopefully you're doing fine. Thank you for the hearts, everybody. Appreciate that. So when you are doing data feeds into a SaaS or even a non-SaaS, okay, you've got a couple of options. So you've got web service calls. Web service calls is you make a request, you get a response. Make a request, get a response. Most APIs out there that are offering that type of API integration or integration point, they're going to have rate limits. And what does a rate limit mean? It means that it's not going to allow you to make a web service request, if you will, 1,000 times within 1 minute. It's going to block you, okay? And that becomes very problematic if you're trying to build something like what I have here, which is an analysis, right? A predictor. This is it's very important that this particular application has near real-time information, or at least information with as little latency as possible. So because of that, we have switched some of the most important data coming into the system from being a web service request, okay, to being a web socket, which is basically a stream of data. And the good news is that Kalshi has that data available for free. Now, you do have to authenticate in order to get access to that data, but it doesn't cost you anything. And that was one of my prerequisites in terms of building this out and having the initial planning conversation I did with ChatGPT about how to use free data to enable this without incurring a lot of charges. Excuse me. So now what I did is I switched some of the data that's coming into here is still using the web service request from Kalshi. The other is using the web sockets available from Kalshi, and that actually improved the performance of this particular predictor quite a bit because it was sticking basically. Because if you think about it, this was an interesting problem that had to be solved that we were able to solve, and that is if you look at the market here, right? This is a 15-minute market for Bitcoin. Will it be up or will it be down from the strike? What's going to happen, right? Well, guess what? This rolls over every 15 minutes. You can see the clock right up here. So every 15 minutes, this is going to roll over to a new market and a new event. Technically a new event, I think. The market stays the same. Let me take that back. The event stays the same. The market changes, I think, in terms of the Kalshi terminology. So each of these time periods here you see is really considered a market, and the overall here is basically the event. And I'm not sure why they do that, but if you go to the larger board here and I click on 15 minutes, we can see here's the event, right? So these are the events, the crypto events, etc. And you can see it has one market. And it only has one market because this is only affecting a single price. It's not like if we go to something like a hourly as an example. With an hourly, here you've got this particular Bitcoin price range today at 6 p.m. And then you have 188 markets associated with this event. And if I were to go into this, we can see all the markets down here, and it's basically ranges, right? So it's a different kind of structure. For myself, I'm just focused on this concept of trying to come up with an edge for predicting the Bitcoin move within a 15-minute time frame. And that's the purpose of that's the whole purpose of the predictor, the Signal Harbor application. So if we look at this, this is going to have the most current information. So up here we have the active market that we're monitoring. That's the details there. If I translate this for you, it's the Bitcoin 15. We can see that by the symbol here. Okay. We can also see the date. So it's the March 28th. It's the 5:45 close on this. So if I go back here, you can see the time frame here where it's closing at. It says 4:45 because I'm in my central zone, and the web is translating or transforming, converting that time zone. But for my purposes on the predictor, it just shows basically Eastern time. So that is what it's currently monitoring. If we look at Signal Harbor, we can see that it's telling us from the analysis that's being done here, and it's a lot. And I'm not going to try to pretend to you that I am a data analysis whiz or data science whiz, because I am not. Okay, but that's my whole point. I don't have to be. The only entity in this room that needs to be a data scientist, okay, is the AI model that I'm using. I have loose understanding of it, but very loose, because it's doing some pretty complex numbers under the hood. So if we look at some of the pieces here, I'll try to walk you through. But this is the, for lack of a try to simplify the words here. For the market that we're watching is specifically this, okay? That 15-minute time frame for Bitcoin that is going to close at 5:45 Eastern time, okay, which is literally about 3 minutes from now. The original analysis on this had it set, meaning it was telling me, based on the analysis, to buy no, okay, and that it had a high confidence of buying no. Now what that means is that if we click back over here to the actual market, you can see you've got ups and you've got downs, right? Now the down is what is referring to as no. So when it says buy no, what it meant was that it's likely going to close below that strike level, okay? And then up would be yes, meaning it's going to close above that level. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, if we look at this at the moment, it looks like it's probably not going to resolve the way that the predictor is expecting, okay? But I'm going to give you some insight in terms of that general concept anyways, excuse me, in a moment. But before I do, let me see what we got going on in terms of TikTok. Okay, any other questions, comments? Welcome back. Adam back. Welcome back, Adam. By the way, there is delay between questions, between live streams, and me seeing things and reading things, etc. So this is about to end where, this is trading at what, 66,815. The strike price is 66,776. So it's pretty far off. I doubt it'll close below. So now here's the thing is, for some of you who are watching, you might think to yourself, well, that means that your predictor does not work. Predictions and probabilities are all about percentages, okay? Almost nothing in this world is 100%, right? I have done a fair amount of stock trading in my life, both day trading as well as long-term investments. And the one thing I can tell you is that a broken clock is right twice a day. And what I mean by that? Well, the reality is this, is that timing has a big impact on whether somebody is right or wrong when it comes to the markets of any kind. Any kind. So if this information is useful within a certain time period, it doesn't mean that it's useful within the entire time period. The prediction is not necessarily trying to predict what's going to happen throughout the entire time period, but it is trying to provide insight in terms of what the bias is going to be within the market during some time period. Now, one of the things is the market's going to roll over here in a minute. It takes a few. So we just hit 445, which is the end of that previous market. Okay, the recommendation went to hold because we hadn't received enough data, okay, on the new time frame, which is now 6 o'clock. Okay, so the new time frame 6 o'clock Eastern. Now it's starting to do the analysis on the new market basically, and coming up with a determination. So in this case, the determination is the same, which is a buy no, which in essence is taking that position of no. So if we look at this, right, and I click on this, let me refresh this because sometimes you need to. Okay, so if we look at this, where is it trading? Well, it actually is trading below the strike price, right? Right now, this is down 88 cents, right? Or so let me rephrase that. And again, not necessarily trying to educate everybody on the predictability or probability markets, but it did take me a little while to figure out the details on this, because it does actually work differently than the stock market does. And that's basically, this is the probability, okay? So the total probability collectively added together for ups and downs, or yes and no's, equals a 1, okay? That's why you have 83 cents here and 20 cents here, roughly equals a 1. So the idea behind the probability is to say, okay, what is the likelihood here of it being down or being up? And that's the idea behind the Signal Harbor, is to collect enough data to provide some kind of indication. So if you had gotten into this trade very early on with a substantial down probability, as it seemingly is indicating here, right, then you would have made some money. Now, will that hold all the way through to the close? Unsure. But typically with the Signal Harbor here, most of what it is actually stating, at least at this point in time, is that the intent in terms of the trade is short term, what it refers to as scalping. And if you give me a second here, excuse me, I might be able to, we should have that information here somewhere. Again, all these data points you see here, these are all data points from the development of this application. Okay. So here's a reporting on the data coming in. It monitors to make sure that the data coming in is relatively in sync. Let's see. So this is the selected market. This is the Coinbase live information coming in. This is the Kalshi live state coming in. This is the cross-feed comparison, basically the comparison between those two. This is information coming from the model, the underlying model itself that was built for the analysis piece. So typically, well, this gives you a decision summary by node, negative probability edge, cleared required threshold. Typically the type of trade is indicated here. There we go. So attribution summary, trade candidate by no, attribution category, action by no, holding bias. This is the key. Okay, so the key is that the holding bias is a scalp, which means that at least the information that the model is receiving at this point in time indicates that you're gonna make you'd want to make it a quick trade in and out within a relatively short amount of time, right? Now, sometimes it resolves to that full downside, and the way it's trading right now could be. So yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. Anybody got questions or comments, feel free to drop them in. I'll happy to try to answer them for you. So in terms of development, if I go back to, again, my planning functionality here, my planning area, which again is ChatGPT, because it doesn't cost me a bunch of tokens, okay, a bunch of coding tokens. This was the last update that I provided. So here's a good example. When I told you the UI was a mess before, what I did was, what I actually did is I took a bunch of screenshots. Okay, so this is the previous UI. As I mentioned, AI kept adding stuff to it, so it started getting kind of messy. So I did screenshots, took screenshots of basically the messiness, okay? I included them into my prompt here. I gave it a very detailed prompt and basically said, listen, before we move on to implementing other features or functions or anything else, the screens have become a mess, right? I speak to it like a human. I give it the humanity test, as I talked about, okay? Now it comes back and says, yes, this needs a redesign before more feature creep. Feature creep is a common terminology in the tech world, especially software, okay? Where people want to put everything in the kitchen sink into one, either application or one screen, whatever it might be, okay? So it gave me a lot of good feedback, okay? A lot of good ideas. And I'm like, well, okay, this is great. Now, do I read all of this? I don't read it all, I will be honest. I skim through it. Sometimes I'll ask it for a TLDR. Too long, didn't read, okay? But I typically will skim through it. Sometimes I'll read it in detail. It depends on what I've asked and what I'm after. But I'm like, okay, it understands what I'm asking for. It agrees that this is kind of a mess, right? So then I ask it, write me a detailed prompt for the UI, UX update, break it down in detail so the coding agent can implement it. And then that's exactly what it did, which is this piece here. Okay, so this is what it wrote, which is quite lengthy. And it writes it in a structure that's easy for a LLM to consume. I can see I'm slipping down in my chair and ending up on a frame. So pass it over to the coding agent, and then the coding agent went ahead and made all the updates. And then after updates, it came back with results. I copied those results back into here so that I can basically keep the conversation between the coding agent and ChatGPT in sync, so they both know what's going on with each other. Now, here's my other tip and trick. I use this coding agent. I'll use the ChatGPT conversations specifically. Again, really important. Create yourself a project, okay? If you can do so with your subscription, and be sure to keep everything within your project in terms of having the conversations back and forth of what you're wanting to do with a particular application. It's going to provide that very important context, okay? Now, with that important context, it's going to have more insight in terms of how to answer your questions and answer them more accurately with the details that not only you have talked about, but also details that have been agreed upon and or that have been implemented by the agent, the coding agent. Now, once that is, what was I going to say? So once you've done that, it came back and it provided the details in terms of what it had implemented, okay? And I passed that back to here so that it was able to understand what had been accomplished, okay? Again, keeping it in sync. And the thing I was going to tell you, now that I remember, is that I do not necessarily come back to the ChatGPT conversation for defect fixes or feature fixes, okay? And that's really important. ChatGPT within our conversation here has got a lot of understanding at a high level, okay? kind of at what would be considered an architectural level, okay, of building an application. It's got that understanding. It's got that smarts, right, of the project and the context of the project. What it doesn't necessarily have is the low-level detailed implementation, right, the actual code itself. So therefore, when I run into a feature that's not working or run into something that feels like a defect that needs to be addressed, then I'm putting prompts directly into Codex to ask for its fix, to do an analysis, etc. Okay, that goes directly into Codex within VS Code and says, hey, this feature is not working. This drop-down list is not working. Whatever it might be, right? Do an analysis and figure out a fix. Now, this will be one of my last tips of the day, and then I'm going to probably sign off because I'm getting hungry and I need myself some pizza. One of the key things to do when you're working within Codex, within the IDE, you want to, more often than not, plan, okay? And what's planning? Planning is similar to what I'm doing in ChatGPT, but at a more detailed level, because at this level with Codex, as the plugin within VS Code, it's got access to all the code over here on the left-hand side that it has been writing and updating so it's got full access to that information. So it's got the necessary details. So I can ask it to plan something, okay, and I can give it a detailed prompt. Plan how we would change the UI. Plan how would we fix, some problem that maybe keeps coming up, etc. Okay. As an example, when we decided to implement the WebSocket instead of the REST calls, and the REST calls were a problem for us because the number of REST calls that were being made, we kept hitting rate limits, and that rate limit then would cause the dashboard to stop updating. So then what we decided to do is switch some of the data flow to a WebSocket. Now, I had the conversation initially with ChatGPT. We did some structuring of that. It handed me a prompt, but then before I had it implement on this side, I said, make a plan to implement this. And one of the reasons I did that, and one of the reasons you should do that, is because it slows down the process a bit. It causes the AI model to think in a much more detailed manner about how it would go about addressing or fixing a problem, adding a new feature, etc. And very, very important when you say plan and you give it the details of what to plan, to give it the permission to ask you questions. Now, sometimes it'll ask you questions by default, but it's always good to say, and if you have any questions, detailed questions, design questions, whatever they might be, ask me. And the nice thing about the interface now with Codex is that when those questions come up, they come up in a structured form that you can answer one by one. And it actually tends to be a multiple choice question, with the last choice always being a free form answer if none of the other options fit your specific requirements or need. So plan, okay, plan outside of Codex in ChatGPT. Continue to update ChatGPT. Have ChatGPT write you the prompts for Codex. Make sure the results of the Codex implementation are shared back to ChatGPT to keep it updated as well. When you are implementing in Codex or thinking about implementing Codex, have it plan as well. Okay, you can even give it a very detailed prompt and say plan. That'll allow it to spend some time thinking about what it needs to update, okay, and how it would go about that. You can do a review of that. The more you know, the better off you are, because there may be something that it calls out that you're like, wait, we've already said we're not implementing Maybe it's, some type of security implementation, or maybe it's I don't know, maybe whether it's a security implementation, or maybe it's a new database, or some other type of implementation or feature or function or design spec that comes back in the planning process, and you're like, wait, we're not doing that. We already said we weren't going to do that. Why are we going down that road, basically? And then you could have that conversation and flesh that out. And sometimes they'll come back to you and say, sorry, my bad. You're right. We talked about that before. So you can't just blindly vibe code. Okay, vibe coding, I think, will go the way of mood rings and pet rocks. Okay, it's a nice pie in the sky vision, but being in the software industry for nearly 30 years, I know the complexity, even with small applications. And yes, you can create something that looks like it's got functionality, but when you start looking into the details, or start trying to make changes to it, from my personal opinion, I think it starts falling apart. Okay, well, those are my tips and tricks. If you enjoyed it, follow along, subscribe, do all those good things, like, comment. And I will be live streaming again, I'm sure, soon. And that next one, I'll probably be doing more hands-on coding, so you can watch more detail, my actual conversations back and forth, and how I continue to develop this application. And let's see, we got a few people still out there. Welcome, thank you. And if you're wondering if that predictor has benefited me at all in terms of trades, the short answer is yes. I've actually been kind of surprised. But again, it's all based on time frame. It has served to be useful to me, at least in the early stages. So we'll see if it continues to be, and I'll continue to share. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day, good night, wherever you might be.